Okay. Time to put this transport back together again. Thought I'd video it, maybe capture some things you need to watch out for with this. Keep in mind there's some rather delicate pieces here. There are these leaf switches. There's one right here, another one under here. Do be careful of those. They're real easy to bend, and you don't want to do that. Jeez whiz, and pieces falling off on me. Don't worry about that in a minute. So, a solenoid bracket and these two switches, just kind of get those up out of the way, and for now, until we get this piece in and this piece again. Oh, well, first we'll deal with this. It has to do with the latching of these function buttons, push buttons if you like. If you look at this piece, that is a round peg, a boss, and this one is not round, it's sort of rectangular. The round one fits in this hole, a round hole. The rectangular one over here, right there, that fits in this hole, which has also got a slot. Normally this pretty much stays in place, but if you flipped it over, it could fall out on you. So this goes in first. The round boss goes into the hole here first, and then if you get this in a certain angle, it'll slip down into this slot, like so, and like that. But don't put it in upside down. It's got to go this way, like that. Okay, that's how this piece belongs. So the hook here for a spring, which we'll get into later. Excuse me. Keep this out of the way. Let me go a little bit more about these cams, particularly this one, which has to do with the pause function while in play. You would tend to not want to have any teeth on either of these cams pointing towards the flywheel gear. This. So just kind of spin these guys, when you go to put the flywheel back in, just kind of spin these guys so that there are no teeth engaged with this. It doesn't matter very much if there are, but it can cause a little bit of trouble getting things put back together correctly. I do want to focus a little bit more on this cam, the pause cam. Putting these back together can be, you can get it wrong. Especially this armature here. Let me get a pointer. This armature here, and this lobe on it. That it's possible to get this back in there with this lobe incorrectly positioned. It's very easy, actually. Done it myself. And you try to work, it won't work. So This lobe has to do with moving this pulley. That's the supply reel. Previous video I kept referring to this as take-up. No. That's the supply reel, the take-up reel. That's the supply reel. That's the take-up reel, the one that engages with this tire here and is associated with the auto stop function here. So during pause, it does, well, among other things, this cam is what's responsible for pulling the heads, these two, the heads and the pinch roller back just a little bit. The pause function also disables the auto stop because the take-up reel won't be turning, and it also disengages the supply reel clutch. It's possible to get this in wrong, and if you do, it's one thing in particular might be causing some folks some grief. So I'm going to put this in and carefully kind of get this solenoid in its bracket and switches aside, and drop this assembly down in. And I think what might be happening in some folks' case is they're not engaging this correctly. This lobe here on this armature, this lobe needs to be on this side of this L-shaped bit, not on the outside. If it's on the outside, and you can get this in there and have it, it won't work. This has to be on this. This has to be on this side of this L-shaped piece. And it takes a little bit of maneuvering to get this back in. There's no question about that. You know, you have to keep all these things in mind. You might have to turn a gear, a pulley a little bit, you know, just to get things to fit in there. And it's actually, I'm struggling with it a little bit myself. I don't know. I'm not sure what the hold up here is. The brakes. Yes, these brakes, they can get in the way when you're trying to put this in. So you might have to pull those back. You can do that from this side. But when you do, this all kind of pops down and you see where this lobe for this armature is with respect to this L-shaped piece that drives this clutch and pulley. It has to be arranged like this. If it's not, it will not work. And I think, I haven't tried it, but I think that might be what was causing some grief for some other folks. It's so easy to get that mixed up. Okay, so how I turn this, you see what should happen is as I turn this, no buttons are engaged, but as I turn this cam, it's doing a couple of things. It's moving this about, which engages it or disengages it from the supply reel. It also should be pushing on a lever here that disables the auto stop circuit. It's not going to do that unless the thing is in play mode and you hit pause. So no buttons pressed right now. What you should see with no buttons pressed and this in place is just what this is doing. This cam here is moving. This cam follower and this armature. There's a spring right there. That's what should happen if you turn this. If you're turning this and this is not moving this way, it's not going to work. And it's probably because you've got this on the wrong side of this lobe for this cam follower and armature. You have to be careful of that. It is possible to get these things put together wrong. So, excuse me. Oh, just turn it over and it got loose. A little bit of tricky to get this back down in there. So, of course, you do not want to force anything. Risk of breakage. Oh, it's the brakes again. Yep, I'm sure. Yep, this needs to go back, and this could fit down in there. And this needs to go like that. Oh, good grief. You gotta love this stuff. So, brakes hitting again, getting in the way. And what is it else? Something, oh, there we go. Okay. And, yeah, there's no movement of this now. It's seated. These bits are engaging the way they should. And this is actuating as it should. Okay, cool. So, before I turn it over and pieces fall out again, I'm going to put the fasteners on in and see what we got here. 4 screws and a spring. Put the 4 screws in first. Use this guy. A little easier. A little bit magnetic. Yeah, just get them started. One here. Let's see, where did that go? There's one, the one that goes under the solenoid. Another one here. Of course, being careful again not to break these leaf switches. Okay, get that in. Snug them up a little, not too tight. And do a quick check to see everything seems to be moving freely. In case you did something wrong, you call some binding, reel spin. Okay, that looks like it's correctly installed. But above all, the part that's likely to hose you, if you're not watchful, is this right here. Turn this, this must move. If it doesn't, you did it wrong. You've got these in the wrong phase. So anyway, turn this around to where there are no teeth presented toward this bearing, which is the bearing for the flywheel. And let's see. That about covers it for this assembly. So, having that put back in, I'm going to remount the solenoid bracket, which also holds these leaf switches. You can see one is actuated by this armature. And those indicate to the circuitry where the drive is, where the transport, what mode it's in. There's another one here, leaf switch, right here. But it does similar. So you got to be mindful of those. Okay, so this spring needs to go back. It goes this spring, which I pulled out when I loosed these screws, these 4 screws that hold this assembly in. This spring had to be removed because it attaches this armature to this hook here. Not sure how easy. Right there, there's a hook and a hole. This has to go back on that. Doesn't matter which way you put it, but thread the spring through the hole, get a tweezer or pliers, needle nose helps, and hook it back. So now that armature is sprung even more than it would have otherwise been by this. And I forget which way these are supposed to rotate. Anyway, that doesn't much matter. Get that spring back in. It's important. It has to be there. Make sure that this lobe pushes against this L-shaped bit, just so, and moves about like that as you turn this cam. That's associated with the pause function. So part of this armature up here pushes on this, which I showed earlier. It's important that it can do that. Actually, it might not be this armature, it might be something else, but this is crucial for the operation of the thing. Yeah, what part isn't? So, excuse me. You'll get this solenoid installed back in its proper place. Not difficult. Ooh, guess we'll need the screws for it. That would be these 2 screws. And let's see. One of them, it's interesting, there are 2 grounding, well, actually a grounding wire which grounds this frame and a cable clamp just to hold these in place, keep them out of the way. So don't forget those when you put these screws back in. Yeah, make this a little bit easier. Yeah. Oops, now see, I just reminded not to forget, and there I was about to forget, so don't forget this ground. Dang on it. Helps a lot to have a magnetic driver. Save you some grief. See why I don't usually spend a lot of video graphing these operations, because they can tend to be a little bit tedious and not a little boring. But since this is kind of maybe a little bit of a how-to with this particular, oh, come on. Yeah. This can be a bit of a pain. Yeah, there we go. Oh, let's just get that screw cross-threaded. Loosen this guy a little. See what I'm doing here. There we are. Wire tie the grounding wire in place. Something offers a little bit more torque. get these nice and snugged. Don't over tighten. You don't need to strip anything. Don't be a stripper. Okay, so this assembly's back in place. Looks like it's about right. Solenoid's back in place. This thing gotta go back in place. It's easy to get it wrong, but not that difficult to get it right. They said this round boss down into the round hole, the rectangular shaped one into the slot, and push that down. And that's all, pretty much all you need to do for that. Alright, so what's next? The flywheel. And once that's in, I do some manual checks just to make sure there's nothing, we didn't screw up anything. Alright, the flywheel itself, pretty clear where that goes is here. Flywheel bearing. While you do that, you got to put the belt on for it. And if I get it, if I'm not mistaken, that's this guy. I made some commentary earlier about this particular belt. It seemed the one, from what I could see, the one they had in there was thicker. It's actually not. It's the same gauge. So this belt is very much like the one that came out of there, only newer. And I'll try to get it on there without twisting it. Not that difficult. Put it on the small pulley first, usually. And, you know, give it a spin. From the bottom here, spin it clockwise. Check to see that this belt, right down in here, is not twisted. If it is, often giving it a few turns will take care of that. And yeah, it's engaged. Nothing's engaged. A couple of gears inside of here, but none of the buttons are pressed. Well, pause is. Right now, none of the buttons are pressed, and so this flywheel turning really isn't doing much of anything because nothing in this assembly is engaged like that. So got that belt on, and the next one is this one, the flat belt that goes from around the outside edge of the flywheel capstan drive to the bottom of the motor pulley. There's two sections on this pulley. Again, do be careful. Make sure this belt is actually down on the crowned part of the pulley, not up on these ridges, because that'll mess you up. Give that a spin. Stop the motor with my hand. This doesn't want to spin at all, so there's no slippage. The top pulley on here is meant for a square belt that engages the supply reel with its clutch. So pop him on. Very easy. It's twisted right now. Let's see what happens. It's not untwisting, so you do have to watch that. Actually, it'll work that way, but it can cause trouble. So make sure these square belts aren't twisted from one pulley to the other. Okay, so it looks like that's all working. We'll do the counter belt later. Not worried about that right now. But got the flywheel in. Two things. There's this teeny little washer I've mentioned before. Be mindful of it. It needs to be there. Pardon me. It'll work without it, but it could cause you grief down the road. Dirt and grime from the tapes getting down into the bearing for this. So we've got the flywheel bracket with its spring attached, That needs to be there, and it needs to attach right here to pull this up. If it's not there, it's not going to work right. Let's see, so the fasteners for the flywheel bracket. There are 3 screws, 2 little shorty ones, 1 longer, and a spacer. That will often stay put there. When you take this apart, do be careful that this doesn't, you don't lose this. And it even looks like it matters which way this goes, although it's just a spacer, so put it on. I think, oh, jeez, drop things down inside. Yeah, one end has a chamfer on the inside edge of it, and the other end is flat. I'm almost certain it goes with the flat end toward this, and that the chamfered end goes toward the bracket, and to kind of help to funnel the longer screw into it. Yeah, something like that. Alright, so it just kind of sits down on here. Put the longer screw in, not necessarily in any particular order. A little loose snugging. And these 2 real shorty guys. These are all metric, by the way. Get those in. Larger driver. And I give a little bit of torque to keep them in place. Very next thing, this tiny little plastic washer goes down over the capstan all the way down. Just drop it home. Okay, so give it a few spins. It really doesn't matter. If nothing's engaged, it doesn't matter which direction you turn it. Not really. If something is engaged or has slipped, your mileage may vary. And lastly, try to keep this in. Let me check. Looks like you can see. Feed this counter belt and install it, and it goes around. You gotta get this right too. It's a little hard to see, but both of these are the same part, but there's a pulley there. And you do have to make sure it's actually in the pulley and not stuck on the hub like I have gotten it. Without breaking anything. Alright. And it's twisted, so we take that twist out. What do we got here? Very good. Jeez whiz, these belts are so small. It's hard to... Yep, it does have a twist in it still. Okay. Okay, now it doesn't. I don't think. Oh man. Sorry to be so quiet. I'm having trouble seeing. Okay, yeah, that belt doesn't have a twist in it. And it's much more grippy than the older belt. Okay, so all the belts are in, and I think this is going to work. Now, back to this spring here attached to the flywheel bracket. Geez, I should have tweezers here, but they're not real handy right now. Let me just fish this out of here. There we are. And that goes right there. Make sense? This applies pressure against this bar. The solenoid lifts this bar, and an impulse from the circuitry pulls in the solenoid, which will release the buttons. This plastic bar here is what holds some of the functions in. Alright, since I pushed a button, it's engaged the function and needs to spin through that, and the flywheel needs to turn to operate the cams to get it in its neutral position, which is where it is now. So let's take a look at what this thing does. No buttons pushed. I'm going to manually turn the flywheel. It will let you know if you're turning it the wrong way. It kind of buzzes. So nothing's engaged. I'm going to push play, and it causes a cam to engage, which pulls the heads up into the tape, engages the pinch roller with the tape, keeps spinning. We now have capstans moving the pinch roller, and the take-up reel is turning. The supply reel is not, because there's no tape, there's no cassette in here. But this does have some resistance upon it. Not a lot. Just enough to keep the tape taut across the heads. Now, I'm going to hit pause. Okay, and keep turning. You will see, maybe a little hard to tell because it happens so slow with me turning it manually. I'm still turning the wheel. This has stopped turning. It's disengaged as it should be in pause. The auto stop function has been disabled through other parts I mentioned earlier. The pinch roller, this right here, is no longer in contact with the capstan, so that it's not, the capstan turns the whole time the motor is on. But once the pinch roller is disengaged, as it is now, just a little bit, it pulls it back just a hair in pause, and it pulls the heads back just a little bit, and will sit like that, and it will not, I'm spinning the flywheel, it will not do anything. It just sits there and waits for you to disengage this pause. So I'm going to do that. Off pause. What happens? It immediately releases these, where they come back fully into the tape and fully engage both heads, engage the tape. The pinch roller again comes in contact with the capstan, and of course the tape, and the take-up reel turns through this tire, by way of this tire. Let's see, hit stop. It immediately pulls everything back as it should be, and I turn the flywheel, nothing spins. So near as I can tell right now, this is working. So I'm gonna finish up here, put some wire clamps back in place. These just keep the wires from becoming in the way when you're putting the thing back, getting tangled up in the mechanisms and springs and stuff. So I'm going to call this done for right now. I can't see anything that looks misaligned. Oh, is this belt? No, he's fine. So put it in neutral. No buttons pushed. Play was pushed. Make sure it's in neutral. It is. Turning the flywheel is not engaging any of the cams. Good policy for that to be the case. Before you put this back in. Okay, so next, fasteners to mount the transport in the base. And let me think about this for a moment before I do that. Might be a good idea to run this through some of its motions. I don't need to mount it or completely hook it up. This connector coming out toward where the buttons are is associated with the switches in here, these leaf switches that sense where the mechanism is so that the rest of the thing knows what the mechanism's doing, what mode it's in. These are all erase, record, playhead stuff. And this one in the back coming out from under the counter here is the motor supply primarily. Let's see what else. Yeah, it's a variable speed motor, so there are more than two connections to it. You know, most of these motors, they just have their own built-in speed regulator, governor, if you like. These motors on these, because they have a speed control on the unit, there are 4 connections, two to supply power to the actual motor, and 2 of them attached to a potentiometer that allows you to control the speed of the motor some. Not a whole lot, but some. It does come in handy. Rather than retune your instrument, you can just dither the tape speed while in play, or record a little bit to compensate for that, to get you in tune. Not get into that a whole lot right now. And daggone it, sure enough, I knocked this belt off of the proper spot. And so you do have to be careful. It's easy to do. You wonder why all your tapes are playing at the wrong speed. They'd be slow if this belt is up on one of these ridges. I hope that shows up. So I think I'm going to cut this off, bring the cabinet over, the rest of it, and just drop this down in there, plug a couple of these in, and run it and see if anything shows up as a trouble. I doubt it. I've been through this thing before a few times, and so we'll see.